my constituents in Senate District 16 learned about a $5 billion road project that was going to take out hundreds of homes and redisplace hundreds of families. Since then, I've been working with my constituents and the legislators to figure out what has happened, why it happened, and is this the way that we really want to build roads in Oklahoma. As a result of that, several lawsuits have been filed. We have 3 pending now, an Open Meetings Act lawsuit that's in district court. I can't even say the Latin name. It's a term to get back the money that wasn't approved. That's also in district court. And then we also have one in the Supreme Court that is to determine if the enabling clause authorizes the roads, the plan, the access plan. So we also have several pieces of legislation that have worked their way through. One piece of legislation that's still alive and is going to be hopefully voted on the Senate floor is to change the composition of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to allow the legislative bodies to have appointments on the Turnpike Authority. Currently, under current law, all of those appointments are made by the governor. By having legislative appointments on the Turnpike Authority, I think it would have alleviated a lot of the surprise that my constituents experienced in East Norman. By having legislative appointments on bodies, one of the jobs of that legislative appointment is to report back to the Senate Pro Tem, or the Speaker of the House, and let them know, hey, something is impacting Senator Warren's district, we need to let her know. So that legislative appointments help keep local communities. It's one way of many to keep local communities engaged and aware of what road projects are going to be impacting their area. That legislative appointment, we think, would have notified the Board of Reclamation, which is, many of you, if you've been following this story, they sent out a letter saying, wait a minute, y'all can't do that, and they gave a really good description of all the reasons why that plan was very problematic to the way that the Lake Thunderbird operates. We have watershed issues in the Lake Thunderbird area. It's our water source for Norman, Midwest City, and Del City. And it's also an area that has a lot of usage for recreational use. And the Board of Reclamation made it very clear that it's over capacity. Having more traffic, more use is not in its best interest at this point, and clarified their concerns. So a legislative appointment on the Turnpike Authority could have enveloped and involved them earlier on in the process in such a and avoided such a reactive way. It would have also, if we would have not gotten down this far down the road and had to see all of the legal problems with it, it could have saved our vendors a lot of money. It could have saved our vendors a lot of time and energy. To start building and working on roads that are not legislatively authorized is problematic for everybody, and it can be avoided. There's a lot of states in the United States that don't do things this way, and we can be one of those states. So here we are. That's kind of just a recap. On April 10th, the OTA paused. They did a statement and announced that they were pausing the access plan. And in their statement, they claimed financial stability of the Turnpike system and also the bond approval process. And that claim needs to be checked. And that's why we're having the press conference today, is to encourage you all to, when the financial stability of the Turnpike system is claimed, we wanted to bring to you awareness and information that calls into question those claims. One thing, when you're applying for a bond, it's like a loan that's co-signed by the taxpayers of Oklahoma. And I don't know of any loan company or any credit company that would issue $5 billion worth of credit without doing a credit check. And what my constituents and what we're asking the auditor to do, and through this system of accountability, is to basically do a credit check on the whole bond process in Oklahoma. One thing that we've learned over the last 14 months is that when the people in Norman that have expertise and have spent their whole life looking into the creditworthiness and the claims of governmental contractors, one thing that we realize is that the claims on the return of revenue for the bonds, for the fees that are paid, the toll fees that are paid, the claimed and anticipated revenues have not panned out. There have been claims that revenues would be at a certain level, and they're way off. And so when you're issuing more bonds, $5 billion more bonds, when 15 years worth of missed revenue projections have happened, then we think that that warrants further scrutiny. And we can't allow a state agency to claim financial stability when there is a significant history questioning that financial stability. So today, to back that up and to provide more context and more information around that, I have brought three of my constituents to kind of address that. The first is going to be Randy Carter. So Randy, if you'll come on up.
Thanks, Senator. Thanks, Senator Bourne. I appreciate that. Yes, and I am a directly affected homeowner. However, I don't think that necessarily impacts my ability to do research and to discover things that we need to know about the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And to that effort, I have I've done a pretty diligent job, I think. Personally, I'm patting myself on the shoulder for that. But anyway, what we're here to talk about today, when the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority announced that they were stopping all work on the access program effectively, I believe April 14th, last Friday, in the statement, Secretary Gatz said, and I'm quoting him here, says, while the OTA remains in a strong financial position, in large part due to exceptional accounting practices and financial controls in place. And unfortunately, I'm here to take issue with those statements. Let's talk about the Oklahoma Turnpike's playbook and what they do, how they have been doing business for a vast majority of the history of their existence. What they do is they hire a firm. The current firm they're using now, I believe, is called C.D.M. Smith. What C.D.M. Smith does is they go out and they look at the projected turnpike routes, and they make a projection of what the traffic will be and what those toll revenues will be. Based on those projections, then the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority goes to the Bond Council on Bond Oversight to get authority to issue bonds to pay for those turnpikes. Well, unfortunately, throughout the history of the Turnpike Authority, those projections have been significantly lower than what actually happens once the turnpikes are built. So what ends up happening is they have turnpikes that are projected to make this much money, and they end up making this much money, and therefore there's a gap in being able to pay the bond debt, maintenance, and operations. And let me talk about it. We've seen a figure that stated that their projection throughout the history of the Turnpike Authority have only been 63% accurate. Now, when I was in school, 63 was an F. So consequently, they have continued to have revenue shortfalls, in my opinion, based on, and we're going to present some other information to do that. The latest example of this is the Kickapoo Turnpike. I'm sure you all are familiar with the Kickapoo Turnpike. It's the newest one in eastern Oklahoma County. And Whitney, if you'll pass out this sheet, I've got some charts on here. The one chart shows that, our title at the Kickapoo is going to need a bailout. What happens here is these are the projections. This is their debt service number, and I'll have one of these for everybody if you'd like. This is their debt service number. These are the turnpike revenues that have been coming in since the Kickapoo is open. So I'd like you guys to look at that and see the gigantic gap that there is between what they projected to come in and what actually is coming in, and their inability to make debt service payments on that and take care of maintenance and operations. And that's the playbook they've used for years and years and years. And That's just not a good business practice as far as I'm concerned. And we, the citizens of Oklahoma, will end up possibly paying the bill of this through taxpayer money if indeed the Turnpike Authority does default at some point. They are projecting, it is my contention that these 3 new turnpikes that are proposed in Cleveland County the reason they are doing that is to generate more bond revenue to pay off the bond revenue that they can't pay off now. They're just kicking the can down the road for future generations. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Tassie Catherine Hirschfeld, who is a PhD professor at the University of Oklahoma in anthropology and has done extensive research with the aid of a CPA, I believe, into the financial misgivings of the Turnpike Authority.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming to listen to us today. As many of you know, we've been following this story for quite some time, and over the past year I've had an opportunity to do a lot of research into Turnpike Authority finances, as well as the history and operations of the Turnpike Authority. So I have a short prepared statement to read, but I would also look forward to talking with any of you one-on-one or answering questions via email. So on April 11th, 2023, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority announced it was stopping all work on Access Oklahoma projects. In his official statement, OTA Director Tim Gatz stated, while OTA remains in a strong financial position, in part due to the exceptional accounting practices and financial controls in place, it can no longer continue work on the Access projects. We are here to question these claims. We believe the OTA is likely in some financial trouble due to years of bad decision-making, exacerbated by the lack of independent oversight at the State Transportation Department. In the words of one expert who helped us review OTA's financial documents, quote, "It appears no one is minding the store." While we believe the state auditor is the best person to explore specific compliance issues, we wanted to draw attention to 2 revealing examples of poor financial decision-making, as well as the overall lack of accountability or transparency at the Turnpike Authority. Number 1, in 2006, the Turnpike Authority lobbied Governor Brad Henry to support House Bill 2474, which allowed OTA to issue risky variable rate bonds. In their annual financial report, the Turnpike Authority claimed that these bonds would generate, quote, net present value savings of $40 million. In actuality, these risky variable rate bonds had to be refinanced, and the process took almost 10 years and generated over $90 million in fees. The individuals responsible for this decision in 2006 continue to make financial decisions for the Turnpike Authority today. They suffered no consequences. They passed all of those expenses on to Oklahoma drivers with no accountability for their own bad decision-making. Example number 2. The 2015-2020 Driving Forward program, which included the Gilcrease and Kickapoo turnpikes, was originally described as an $850 million expansion plan. With no public discussion or explanation, these projects ended up costing around $1.5 billion. Traffic and revenue across the turnpike system have not changed much since 2015, but the OTA's debt has increased exponentially, and that's the graph that we have on the other handout for you. Since at least 2005, the OTA's annual debt service payments have exceeded the annual operations and maintenance expenses. We present these facts to support our claims that between 2015 and 2020, OTA borrowed too much money to build unnecessary roads, specifically the Kickapoo and Gilcrease turnpikes. These sentiments were echoed by an analyst from Moody's in 2020 who described the Gilcrease projects as being, quote, over-leveraged and having limited essentiality. That is bond analyst speak for spending too much money on unnecessary roads. We believe the OTA is repeating these same mistakes with Access Oklahoma, only at a much larger and more destructive scale. As of February 2023, OTA spent over $60 million on preliminary access work, even with a serious legal challenge pending in the state Supreme Court, and another court ruling last December, the open meetings case, that invalidated all access-related contracts. In short, no government agency that engages in this kind of reckless borrowing and overspending with no transparency and no accountability can hope to remain solvent over time. We reiterate our support for a thorough investigative audit and look forward to seeing the results. Thank you.
Thanks, Tassie. Our next speaker is Dr. Amy Serrato. She is a professor at the University of Oklahoma as well in engineering, and she also has the title PE, which stands for Professional Engineer. So we contend she is an extremely qualified professional to deal with civil engineering issues. So, Amy, come on up.
Hello, everybody. So, Pike OTA and the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation Group spun up very quickly after the announcement on February 22nd, 2022, and we're a nonprofit 501c4, and our mission is to bring to light the bad practices of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And we've been working really diligently for over a year to dig into the finances and the poor engineering practices that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority engages in over the last 70 years. And so when I first heard about this access plan on February 22nd, 2022 from a text from my neighbor, I had not understood or never even thought about the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority from a civil engineering perspective, since I had never worked for them nor driven turnpikes in Oklahoma. And when I first got involved, I got involved because I am an impacted homeowner on the proposed southern extension, but I stayed involved because it is absolutely horrendous how the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority can get away with continually doing bad engineering and poor fiscal practices. And so why I think the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority builds financially unsustainable and disastrous toll roads, and why they are continuing to do so with no oversight, is that they have a financial aspect of their program called cross-pledging. And before we put Band-Aids on anything else, we have to understand how their foundation is made. And their foundation is that they can build anywhere they want, spend as much money as they want because of cross-pledging. And what that means is they have a few money-making turnpikes across the state of Oklahoma, like the Kilpatrick and the Turner, that pay for any other turnpike that they decide to put up that doesn't make money, like the Chickasaw and the Indian Nation and the H.E. Bailey. And so until we get a handle on how until we force them to make financially responsible decisions and build roads that will actually get used, I think that the whole metric of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authorities is going to continue to be broken. And so cross-pledging is the first reason. The second reason is that their justification studies for why they want to build roads are completely flawed. From the traffic projections to the population projections to the out-of-state company that they have continually hired for the last several decades, CDM Smith, producing bad data using bad models. They continue to justify the need for a roadway based on fear. So they tell the citizens of central Oklahoma that if you don't build this turnpike, the safety on I-35 is in question. And if you don't build this turnpike, more fatalities will occur, and you'll be sitting in traffic for an hour. And they use fear to try to entice the Oklahoma citizens to jump on board with their new turnpike idea. And quite frankly, when we make decisions based on fear, we make bad decisions. And I'm here today to tell you as a professional civil engineer that their justifications, including their traffic projections on I-35 between Purcell and I-40, from 1999 to 2020, for example, were 73% overstated. And they continue to be overstated decade after decade. They said that we'd have 180,000 cars on that particular leg. Well, we only have 104,000 cars. And if you look at the back of the handout that I provided, you'll see that the traffic actually along the I-35 corridor has remained constant since 2011. And so there is no traffic justification for new alignment turnpikes in the state of Oklahoma. I would say anywhere in the state, not just in Cleveland County. The second fear-induced model that they promoted was a population projections. And they said that our population would double by the year 2050. And there have been many experts from around the country to jump into this conversation and say they're absolutely incorrect. And so the population models and projections are wrong, and they continue to be wrong from the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. The third reason is that they refuse to engage with municipalities. They literally plan their routes in secret. The Kickapoo Turnpike that was built, taking 104 family homes and overrunning in cost, I think around 60 or 65%, was illegal. They had no authorization. There is no location authorization for that road in the statute. And in fact, when they described the Kickapoo, they said that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority Board authorized that roadway. Well, that's not how it works. And so when they tried to bundle these 3 illegal turnpikes in Cleveland County, along with 4 more popular and some would argue necessary improvements to their existing roadways, including access points along the Indian Nation, widening of the Turner, some work on the Gilcrease and the Will Rogers, they were snowballing the Oklahoma citizens because they wanted everyone to think that the access program, that $5 billion, was a super important project that needed to be pushed through using fear and propaganda, when in reality they were just trying to hide the fact that 3 of those proposed routes were completely illegal. And by bundling those 3 illegal turnpikes with the 4 existing improvement projects, they are going against their statement that they believe that safety is the most important aspect of what they do. Because if they truly believe that, they wouldn't have spent $56 million to design roadways that the Bureau of Reclamation told them they couldn't build. And so that brings me to my last point, that the leadership of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is poor. The secrecy and the unwillingness to unbundle those illegal turnpikes with the widening projects and improvement projects is why the access program was stopped. If the leadership had made the intelligent decision to split those 3 illegal turnpikes off and continue on to the bond market with their maintenance projects, they would be working today. And so, as a professional civil engineer, I would like to make it very clear that they have completely forgotten about how to conduct sound engineering practices, from the justification to the design and to the implementation, and that we really hope that the Turnpike Enabling Act can be reformed to put guidelines that will force the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to engage in sound justification practices, to engage with the municipalities, so that the roadways are both wanted, needed, and sited in the correct location, and that they become financially responsible in that they don't feel that they can build a road just anywhere for their developers, to make money by building development along those turnpikes, and that the turnpikes would be fiscally responsible and actually utilized by the citizens of Oklahoma. And the position of the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation is that Oklahoma doesn't need new alignments, we need better roads. And we have a lot of unfunded liabilities in terms of maintenance across the state that we'd like to see both the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority and the Oklahoma Department of Transportation work on.
Okay, thank you so much. Tassie, if you'll come up here. Do we have any questions? If you have a question, just, I guess, ask, and then whoever you want to answer it, would be happy to answer it.
I guess I just want to clarify, the from your guys' perspective, you believe that OTA is continuing to build turnpikes to continuously pay off debt? Is that in a nutshell?
Yes, that's what the evidence shows, that when you anticipate revenue at this level and a population at this level, but it comes in at this level, then to fill in that gap, they have to either issue more bonds to cover that debt and to stay on top of their debt payment, or they have to raise toll fees in the other overperforming or on performance, those that are paying for their usage, you have to increase toll fees. And we just recently changed the law to allow the Turnpike Authority to make their own decision of when they're going to increase fees. But to cover that much of a gap, it's going to take a whole lot more than just increasing fees. It's got to be issuing more debt or more bonds to cover that debt. And we've seen that same pattern happening. And I think it also explains why you would put a turnpike in a highly populated area as opposed to what the original turnpikes were, was to connect areas of Oklahoma that needed connection through a toll road. Now they're starting to put them in high traffic areas because the fees will be more, they're assuming that the fees will be more used. But there again, we can't trust the numbers because for 15, 20 years, the people making the projections have been off by so much. So given that, that's why accountability is really important now more than ever, especially if we're starting to do $5 billion projects, which is significantly higher than any other project that we've ever done in Oklahoma.
Have you had communications with the state auditor, and if so, what have those conversations looked like?
Yes, I sat in with the state auditor about a year ago. I know that Representative Menz and others from the Norman areas, and Representative Sterling, have met with her about our concerns and what we've learned from our constituents. Honestly, she said, you know, her plate's really full. And that should say a whole lot about Oklahoma. When your state auditor has so much on her plate to sort out regarding misusing of state funds, that holding a $5 billion project accountable is beyond her capacity. So I shouldn't say it's beyond her capacity, but it's really stretching the resources of her agency. And of course, we would never want an agency to be so stretched that the people involved in that can't have really good outcomes, because when you stretch your staff that far, then at some point, you know, things kind of can start falling through the cracks, and that's the last that we wanted to do. So that's why we, in some ways, we were a little bit empathetic when we were trying to get through the lawsuits that were going on, and we kind of pulled off the gas. And then the Attorney General jumped in and called for an investigative audit. So now, what I hope the legislature will do, will make sure that the State Auditor Inspector's Office is fully funded to manage the level of investigations that we, and the audits that she, the regular audits that she has to do, the every 2-year audits, and the every 5-year audits that she's supposed to do, so that she can also handle these kinds of investigative audits when the citizens of Oklahoma need those kinds of audits to be taken care of.
You guys may have touched on this, but the ripple effects of the $5 billion project being postponed, I'm not sure when that resumes again, but if their plan, according to you guys, is to keep creating projects to pay off debt, I'm assuming the postponement of a project and the loss of potential revenue there is not very good financially. What would be the long-term or short-term ripple effects of that?
And I'll preface this by saying we're speaking from very incomplete information, because we only know what's in their public documents, which at times has been incorrect. But it does appear that they have a big increase in debt service payment coming this year. They took out several short-term loans to fund their maintenance fund during the pandemic, and I believe those are all coming due in 2023. Now, they did raise tolls several times last year. They were small, but that adds up. So it's difficult to predict with much precision at which point the lack of new bond money will impact their operations. But we can say that it does look like they have been using bond money from the Driving Forward program to fund operations and maintenance, which is not a good sign. And so I think it's anybody's guess, like when this will all actually combine to cause interruption in service or whatever kind of consequences might come from that. So we're all kind of guessing, but it doesn't look good.
I just want to clarify, just as a state legislator, that it's really important to set the expectation with the vendors that do business in Oklahoma, that it is not okay, or they shouldn't have a business model where they're depending on flawed projections for revenue in order to do business in Oklahoma. So this business model of having no bid contracts and plans being determined more by lobbyists than by local communities, that kind of business plan should not be accepted in Oklahoma as a way to do business with Oklahoma. So yes, there is some pain here, but all of this pain could have been avoided. And it could have been avoided even earlier on, even back in February, when people immediately said, wait a minute, we're not okay with this. And when the town halls were not very productive and the conversations with local legislators were not productive, all of that could have saved the vendors and the state a lot of pain. But unfortunately, for 70 years, when that pushback has come through, they have been successful in just plowing over it and getting to the goal that they wanted to get to. So a lot of the pain that we're experiencing now is self-inflicted, and it could have been avoided. And hopefully that we can avoid it moving forward. Yeah.
So one of the reasons why they are always seemingly out of money is because they don't engage in correct civil engineering financial practices, which is when you put out a competitive bid. So the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is exempt from the Competitive Bid Act, meaning that they have preferred consultants and they pay them whatever they want. And there's something called a not to exceed contract. So say I need some work done and you put a bid in or put your number in and it's $500,000. Well, I'm not allowed as the state of Oklahoma to pay you more than $500,000 without a good reason. The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority doesn't have to follow those rules. And so if you look at their finances, over contract, they average 139% of original contract. So overage. So that means that if your original contract was $400,000, you might walk out the door with $1.5 million. That's a pretty good payday. And so that's one of the reasons why that they can't keep up with their maintenance and their improvement projects, is because they have no financial stop on what they're paying contractors and consultants. And that is why the contractors and consultants love to work for the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority and prefer that over the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, who have fiscal responsibility and can only pay up to 3% over the original contract amount with justification. And so we're very excited about this investigative audit, because I think that what the Oklahoma citizens are going to find out is that there are 12 to 15 preferred consultants and contractors that are making literally tens of millions of dollars on the backs of knocking down regular Oklahoma citizens' homes for roadways that don't get used and can't pay for themselves. And so that's why, one of the many reasons why they're in such financial straits.
Any other questions?
I think one important question to ask is who in power benefits from this problem not being solved? Who in power benefits from not having roads built in a non-chaotic way with contracts that are bidded that perform within that margin of error of 3%? Because when we start answering that question, then it kind of really discloses why the pushback on this accountability that regular citizens are trying to hold the state to That's why it's so hard for Oklahomans to hold government accountable in Oklahoma, because when you're able to profit at that level without accountability, and you're almost guaranteed 139% return on what you bid, you know, who wouldn't be for that deal? And just think about how hard it is then when you're a regular citizen to stop that. Because if you've been used to doing that for decades, then to have people garner the resources to stop that infrastructure that is so profitable for so few people, it takes a lot. And the people that you have here today that live in my district have been at this for 14 months. And some of them, it's been a full-time job. And I do not think that Oklahomans should have to basically have a whole nother job just to make sure that lobbyists and no-bid contractors aren't screwing them over every day. They should be workers. You know, we've got people here that have full lives. They should be able to get up in the morning, make their coffee, get in their car, go to work, and get home by 7 and spend time with their family. They should not have to use all of their extra resources. I mean, we have people that have missed all kinds of family time. They have missed all kinds of things with regular life, living life. And when this first happened, I told them, I said, y'all, this is going to take a long time, and you need to pace yourself or you will burn out. And you will have compassion fatigue. And it will take a toll on your relationships. And some of your family members may not want to do this, and that's what also happens in Oklahoma. You got family members who are like, why are you fighting this so much? Why are you doing this? Why are you taking so much time away from our family to go fight this? It's fruitless. We should just sell out and move. And that's what you hear. And it's all because there are very few people that profit off of this kind of mechanism, and it takes so many people to hold government accountable in Oklahoma. And we don't have to live like this. We can live better. And I'm very grateful and I'm very inspired. And I tell you what, as their senator, I have to watch my P's and Q's because, you know, they'll be on me fast if I just try to blow off what they say. And in fact, at the very beginning, I was thinking, well, I guess y'all are going to have to get an eminent domain attorney. And within like an hour, they're like, no. Like 18 voices at me immediately. No, you need to listen. And so then I stepped back and I'm like, okay, let me hear what you have to say. They started showing me in the statute, this doesn't line up. They started showing me all the economic flaws. They started showing me all the engineering flaws. And so in response to them, to elevate their concerns, which are characteristic of all of Oklahoma, it's not just in Senate District 16. This has happened in the Gilchrist area, happened in the Kickapoo area. We've got to put a stop to this and correct our course so that future generations and future families do not have to watch over their back every day for 14 months to hope that they get to continue to live where they had every right to think that they could live. Because all we're asking is for the government to follow their own laws. We're only asking the government to follow the Open Meetings Act and the enabling clause. That's all we're asking. We're asking them to use good engineering science. We're asking them to use the same fiscal guidelines, the same money sense that businesses in Oklahoma have to follow. There's no business in Oklahoma that has a business plan that you're going to bid a contract and that you can guarantee 139% return. There's no business that gets to do that unless you have some inside angle in government. Those are the only businesses that get to do that. And so I'm very grateful for my constituents of helping make Oklahoma accountable, because I do think it'll make Oklahoma's future brighter. Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anybody would like to talk to any of our people individually, we'd be glad to do it out in the lobby. Senator Bourne needs to get back to the floor to vote on some things, so we're going to vacate this room to let the Senate get back to business.
If anyone wants a handout that didn't get one, I've got all of these over here as well.
We took over their